Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Good evening. It is 6:32 and it's Wednesday, September 9th, 2020, and the meeting of the Urban Design Commission will come to order. May we have a roll call?
Arthur Clark,
Here.
Barbara Cash,
Here.
Carla Baxley,
Here.
Edith McKee,
Here.
Jerry Winchester,
Here.
Melissa Morse, Monica Sullivan,
Here.
Nicole Ream.
Here.
Thank you.
Moving on to minutes. May we have a motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, August 11th?
So can you guys do a first and a second or not?
I need a motion. If you can go ahead and request to speak,
Or motion to approve?
or please state that you.
Motion to approve the minutes? Is it coming out?
No.
It's approved because they don't have approved.
Move to approve the motion.
Oops, I forget it's not it. You should be there, right? I hit.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Commissioner McKee and a second from Commissioner Cash. Are there any objections or corrections to the minutes being approved? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Moving on to special order of business. Are there any disclosures this evening?
So why isn't it giving me a statement?
Bear with us for just one moment, please. looks like we do not have any disclosures this evening. Moving on, the next item on our agenda is item G, public hearings. Before I proceed, the two public hearings that we have this evening are in fact related, and therefore we may combine them and have them presented at the same time. However, to proceed in this way, I will need a motion, a second, and a vote in the positive. So while we pull up that motion, I will go ahead and state what that motion is. I need a motion to combine case 2020-0113, request for design variance from AMC 2107-080E1, table 2107-2, minimum site perimeter landscaping by abutting district or street, and case 2020-0114, major site plan review for a multifamily development known as Spinard East R2M multifamily development. I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Cash and a second from Commissioner Baxley. Do you care to speak to your motion, Commissioner Cash? You don't have to. And do you care to speak to yours, Commissioner Baxley?
No.
Thank you. May we have a vote to combine these two cases? Commissioner Sullivan, since you are not here, you may go ahead and give us a verbal vote.
Yes.
Thank you. And the motion passes. So now I will read the procedure by which the public may speak to the Urban Design Commission at its meeting. The procedure by which the public may speak to the Urban Design Commission at its meeting is: 1. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. 2. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Urban Design Commission Rules of Procedure. Since we have combined these two cases, the times for the individuals, petitioners, and representative groups have doubled, so I will read those. Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, have 20 minutes. Rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time has been reserved. Representatives of groups such as community councils, PTAs, etc., will be given 10 minutes, and individuals will be given 6 minutes. Number 3, when your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the Commission. Number 4, an individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Urban Design Commission takes, except Commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Urban Design Commission of the resolution, which is the Commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. So moving on, we do have case 2020-0113 and 2020-0114. The petitioner is Cook Inlet Housing Authority. May we have staff's presentation?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll begin with my presentation on the variance. The petitioner is applying for a variance from Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 080E1, Table 21.07-2, minimum site perimeter landscaping by abutting district or street to install L1 visual enhancement landscaping along an abutting arterial, which is West 36th Avenue, instead of L2 buffer landscaping. They're requesting this to allow for increased natural surveillance from the petition site to and from West 36th Avenue, using crime prevention through environmental design principles. The Planning Department has reviewed the application and presents the following findings for the Commission's consideration. For variance standard A, we do believe the standard is partially met. The applicant is requesting approval for a variance to install L1 visual enhancement landscaping along West 36th Avenue instead of L2 buffer landscaping as required per the subject standard. This will result in landscaping which does not achieve the design standard per code, but it will result in benefits which address issues beyond the site aesthetics. This request has become necessary given issues with unauthorized activity and misconduct that has been noticed in the immediate surrounding area. To combat this issue, the applicant has chosen to incorporate crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED, principles into their site design to naturally control and minimize unwanted behavior both at and near the petition site. By reducing the number, height, and width of required plantings, the vegetation density will be reduced, thus improving sight lines to and from West 36th Avenue. This will allow natural surveillance of West 36th Avenue from future residents of the planned multifamily development, as well as from passing traffic. The increased surveillance serves as a natural deterrent to individuals who may be looking to conduct unwanted activity within the landscaped area. Allowing for the reduced landscape standard will assist in maintaining site security, thus improving the daily lives of residents. For standard B, we believe the standard is met. The parcel is classified as a compact mixed residential medium within a transit supportive development in the 2040 Anchorage land use plan map. The granting of this variance will not change the classification of this parcel in the comprehensive plan. We also believe it's compliant with the following policies of the Anchorage 2040 land use plan, and those would be land use policies 2.3, 3.1, and 7.1. For variance standard C, we do believe the standard is met. This proposed design alternative will benefit the surrounding community by reducing the amount of available sheltered area where unwanted and unauthorized misconduct can be conducted. Using natural methods to control unwanted behavior is preferable because the cost of maintenance is significantly lower than using traditional methods such as employing security guards and or maintaining expensive electronic surveillance systems. Discouraging misconduct in the immediate surrounding area of this multifamily housing complex will benefit the community by deterring and preventing potentially criminal activity within and around the petition site. For variance standard D, we do believe the standard is met. The granting of this variance will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property. For variance standard E, we do also believe the standard is met. This variance will not change the character of the B3 district or the R2M district where this project is located, nor will it permit a use not otherwise permitted in both of those districts. For standard F, we do believe the standard is met. The granting of this variance will not restrict or impede ADA accessibility or reasonable accommodation. For standard G, we do believe the standard is met. The granting of this variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the municipality. This variance is being requested to improve the safety and welfare of the residents of the planned multifamily housing development within the petition site using CPTED principles. Reducing the density, width, and height of the required landscaping will assist in improving sightlines to and from 36th Avenue. Additionally, this reduction will minimize the number of areas an individual may use to conceal themselves to carry out misconduct or criminal acts. The granting of this variance will provide design flexibility for redevelopment of a derelict property. Improving site aesthetics and establishing a constant presence will reduce the amount of unwelcomed activity at this location. This will be a benefit to the surrounding community and the people of the municipality. For standard H, we do believe the standard is met, and that's simply because this variance request does not involve a sign. So for the design variance, the planning department does recommend approval. We do find that all variance standards are met, and we do recommend approval subject to conditions 1 and 2 on page 7 of the staff packet for the design variance. And with that, I will move on to my presentation on the major site plan review. So Cook Inlet Housing Authority is requesting an approval of a major site plan review with an accompanying alternative equivalent compliance request for a new 36-unit multifamily housing development within Spenard. The petition site is located southeast of the intersection of Spenard Road and West 36th Avenue. This development will ultimately result in the addition of 86 new residential units, but only 36 of those are required to obtain approval through this major site plan review request due to the underlying R2M zoning. The applicant is also seeking concurrent approval for 4 alternative equivalent compliance, or thereafter referred to as AEC, requests to install alternative site landscaping to a substitute equivalent standard. The details behind each AEC request are detailed in the staff analysis and approval criteria below, so I will address those further. The Planning Department has reviewed the application and presents the following findings for the Commission's consideration. For approval criteria 1, the applicant is requesting concurrent approval for a subdivision plat that will subdivide the underlying 20 parcels involved with the entire development into 4. This request is being heard under case S12566, which will be going before the Platting Board on September 16th of this year, so next week. Because this major site plan review is being decided upon prior to the plat, the approval and recordation of the concurrent plat shall be condition of approval given that the proposed site plan shows building footprints which cross existing lot lines. It's also important to note that there's no other conflicts with any other underlying plat or other land use approval. For approval criteria 2, the petition site is zoned R2M, which is mixed residential district. This project will further the intent of the underlying zoning district. The submitted site plan complies with the district-specific standards of Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 4, subsection 020F, which affect this use. And this request is before the Urban Design Commission in accordance with the procedures of Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 3, subsection 180D2, and Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 110F2B3. No other use-specific standards affect this use. There's no conflicts with the proposed plans and the dimensional standards of Anchorage Municipal Code. There will be no structures placed within required setbacks once the corresponding plat being heard under platting case S12566 is recorded. The submitted site plan appears to conform to the stream protection setbacks as required by Anchorage Municipal Code. However, the stream setback shown in the submitted site plan appears to have been drawn along the stream center line and not the ordinary high water mark. The applicant shall be required to resolve this matter with Watershed Management Services. The submitted site plan does comply with the open space requirements of Anchorage Municipal Code. It's also unclear to reviewing staff whether or not the site plan complies with the snow storage requirements of Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 040F4, snow storage areas on new development sites, which requires a minimum area equal to 10% of the paved surface area to be dedicated to snow storage. Snow storage area is shown on the site plan, but it's unclear what the dimensions of the snow storage area is and what its boundaries are. This revision to the site plan shall be required as a condition of approval. Compliant pedestrian access connection with a minimum dimension of 5 feet in width is provided from each group of buildings as required. And to achieve compliance with the landscape standards of Anchorage Municipal Code, the applicant has chosen to install alternative landscaping which will deviate from code standards within the project area. This alternative landscape plan is only possible if the accompanying alternative equivalent compliance requests are approved. And those requests are as follows. So for AEC request 1, that's the installation of L1 visual enhancement landscaping as an alternative to L2 buffer landscaping along the west property line as required by Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 080E, Table 21.07-2, minimum site perimeter landscaping by a budding district or street for an R2M district abutting a B3 district. This alternative is being requested to maintain design and aesthetic continuity within this development, which spans across 2 separate zoning districts, and those would be the B3 and the R2M. It's important to note that in order for the Commission to grant this request, They do have to find that the three approval criteria A, B, and C for an AEC request are met. The analysis of AEC 1 is as follows. For approval criteria A, the petition site is within a major, the petition site, my apologies, but the petition site within this major site plan review is zoned R2M and abuts a parcel zoned B3. The B3 zone parcel is within the larger Spinard East development. Allowing for the installation of L1 landscaping along this zoning boundary will allow for open sight lines between developments and will maintain the intent of landscaped buffers between zone districts. For approval criteria B, we do believe it's consistent with the applicable comprehensive plans, and that would be specifically policy 49 of Anchorage 2020, and that'd be policy 2.3 from Anchorage 2040. For approval criteria C, we do believe that that is met. The design alternative will result in a more inviting and safe residential development due to the inclusion of septic principles. A landscape break will still be installed at the required location, but reducing the density of plantings within the break will help maintain sight lines between this lot and the adjacent development to the west. This will increase the amount of natural surveillance across the greater Spinard East development, improving overall security and safety of residents. For AEC Request 2, that would be the installation of L1 visual enhancement landscaping and additional shared open space along the west property line as an alternative to L2 buffer landscaping as required by Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 080E, Table 21.07-2, minimum site perimeter landscaping by abutting district or street for an R2M district abutting a B3 district. This alternative is being requested to maintain design and aesthetic continuity within this development, which spans across two separate zoning districts. For approval criteria A, allowing for the installation of L1 landscaping along the zoning boundary will allow for open sight lines between developments and will maintain the intent of a landscape buffer between zoning districts. Additionally, shared open space located on the abutting B3 parcel to the west will be available for use by residents of the entire Spinard East development. Allowing for the installation of L1 visual enhancement landscaping as an alternative to buffer landscaping along the western property boundary will provide a landscape break between the two areas of the development, but will also allow for open sight lines and natural surveillance from one side of the landscape break to the other. We do believe that this request is consistent with applicable comprehensive plans, and that would be specifically policy 49 of Anchorage 2020 and policy 2.3 of Anchorage 2040. For approval criteria C, the design alternative will result in a more inviting and safe residential development due to the inclusion of septed principles. Landscape break will still be installed at the required location, but reducing the density of plantings within the break will help maintain sightlines between this lot and the adjacent development to the west. This will increase the amount of natural surveillance across the greater Spinard East development, improving overall security and safety of residents. For AEC request number 3, that would be the installation of green infrastructure, aka rain gardens, to naturally control drainage along the southwest property line as an alternative to L2 buffer landscaping as required by Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 080E, Table 21.07-2, minimum site perimeter landscaping by abutting district or street for an R2M district abutting a B3 district. This alternative is being requested given the unique on-site conditions and the additional non-disturbance area within the stream protection setback, which will ultimately serve as an additional buffered landscape area from the petition site to the adjoining B3 district. For approval criteria A, allowing the installation of green infrastructure as an alternative to L2 buffer landscaping is in keeping with the intent and purpose of AEC, which allows for design flexibility as a response to on-site conditions. Because a portion of Fish Creek passes through the petition site, it is important to control sediment deposition that may migrate off-site into Fish Creek using natural materials. The use of natural materials will also help preserve site aesthetics and enhance the wild nature of our stream corridors. For approval criteria B, we do believe it's consistent with applicable comprehensive plans, specifically policy 70 of Anchorage 2020. And for approval criteria C, we do believe installing green infrastructure specifically targeted at treating and retaining stormwater in this location as an alternative to L2 buffer landscaping will reduce the influx of untreated water flow into the Fish Creek watershed during large rain events. This will be a benefit to the community by contributing to overall improved surface water quality within the immediate area and the municipality by reducing sediment load within our stormwater system. Considering the number and type of dwelling units on site, the site is required to provide 64 parking spaces. This site is currently providing 80 parking spaces and it is in compliance with the off-street parking spaces required standards in Anchorage Municipal Code. It's also compliant with vehicle access and circulation as well as dimensions of parking spaces and aisles. For the design standards for a multifamily housing development for brevity, I'm just going to go over that they are compliant with Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, Chapter 7, subsections 110C3, C4, C6, C7, C8, and C9. The applicant has chosen to apply for an alternative landscape design in order to fully comply with Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 110C10, which is front driveway separations, and 11C10C, common parking facilities and driveways. This alternative equivalent compliance request is as follows. So it's requesting an alternative landscape design. And my apologies, this is AEC 4. Requesting an alternative landscape design to allow for half of shrubs required under Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 110C10B, front driveway separations, and Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 110C10C, common parking facilities and driveways, to be replaced by perennials at a 1-to-3 ratio. So it'd be one shrub for every 3 perennials. And the approval criteria for this AEC request for approval criteria A, we believe this request will allow for a consistent landscape aesthetic across the greater Spenard East development and is comparable with the optional design standards allowed under other sections of Anchorage Municipal Code, specifically Chapter 7, subsection 080E, Table 21.07-1, landscaping specifications. The optional design standards under L1 Visual Enhancement Landscaping allow for the planting of, and I quote, up to 1/2 of total required shrubs may be substituted with perennial plantings at a ratio of 3 1-gallon container perennials for every shrub required, end quote. We do believe for approval criteria B that this is consistent with applicable comprehensive plans, specifically policy 49 of Anchorage 2020. And for approval criteria C, we do believe that providing design flexibility to better serve the overall design and aesthetics of this development will make this residential development a more attractive place to live. Having a cohesive aesthetic will assist in instilling a sense of community and place among residents. This will be an overall benefit to the community by providing a safe, attractive, and inviting housing opportunity to residents. For approval criteria 3, the applicant has developed the site plan through several iterations to best mitigate any anticipated negative impacts to the surrounding neighborhood. The corresponding AEC and design variance request will provide some design flexibility for the applicant, but they're also intended to deter unwanted behavior on and around the petition site by increasing natural surveillance. A private meandering roadway, which meets the requirements of AMCR 2190, runs through the property. The meandering nature of this roadway is intended to minimize the amount of cut-through traffic that passes through the site. Additionally, the applicant has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the municipality to support the rehabilitation of Fish Creek to mitigate any impacts this development may have on the Fish Creek watershed. For approval criteria 4, we do believe that this project is compliant with the applicable comprehensive plans, and that would be specifically policy 9, 12, 49, and 54 of Anchorage 2020, and Goal 2 and Policy 2.3, as well as Goal 7 of Anchorage 2040. The department does recommend approval subject to the conditions as stated on pages 12 and 13, but I do have a revision that we are going to request, and that would be to condition E5. We did receive some last-minute comments from Watershed Management Services. They did request an amendment to this condition, and the amended condition will read as follows. Be it resolved with Watershed Management Services, any necessary revisions to the site plan to verify no structure or disturbance otherwise not permitted by the existing Memorandum of Understanding dated March 8th, 2019, will occur within the required stream setback as measured from the ordinary high water mark. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? Okay, it does not appear that we have any questions for staff. My apologies, technology. We do have a question for staff from Commissioner McKee.
My question pertains to the conditions that are included with 4 and 5 of case number 2020-0114. Is there any consideration to adding those to the department recommendations that are included under case 2020-0113 about the stream setback? Because that was also a comment made by the municipality of Anchorage project management and engineers that to the design committee that they consider the advisory comment 25-foot creek offset shown on the submitted documents in that packet.
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner McKee. It would be the preference that we keep those conditions just on the major site plan review, just due to the scope and nature of each request. The design variance only pertains to the frontage along West 36th Avenue, and the stream setback is outside of that scope of that request. So we would prefer that the conditions stay with each applicable case as suggested by staff.
I'm not seeing any further questions for staff. I believe we have a petitioner online. If the petitioner would please state and spell your name for the record, and if you would like any of the 20 minutes that you have for rebuttal.
Minutes for rebuttal. Hopefully it doesn't take that long.
Okay, you may proceed.
And if possible, okay, we're just trying. Just
Are you able to see my screen?
I see the screen up. Does everybody see the screen up?
One moment, we see it on our local computer, but I think we need to share this with the larger screen. Okay, I think we have it up on the screen.
Okay, great. And I will, I'll ask Bree to advance it. Hopefully it stays up with us. But thank you, Madam Chair, staff, members of the commission, for the opportunity to talk about this development project with you this evening. I'm going to try to keep it kind of high level and provide a little bit of context that will help you in, I think, what are potentially 6 decisions here this evening, and give you that context. So, Bree, next slide. We've been working on this site for probably 8 years or so. That includes land assemblage, environmental remediation, and really countless conversations with municipal staff. This is a particularly challenging area when you add in the soil condition, but also infrastructure, some of the environmental issues that we had. And staff has been great to work on. I think they mentioned in the staff report numerous iterations on the site plan. I think you'll have to take my word for it, but I believe we had developed over 20 different conceptual site plans, and this is the one that sort of rose to the top. Next slide, please. Just to let you know, or sort of drill home, obviously there's a platting action underway, and so this is the larger site area, which we consider one development, but you all are dealing with a site plan on what will be the largest of the R2M lots. And what we're effectively doing is, in front of the planning board next week, to eliminate interior lot lines, dedicate right-of-way on the exterior of the site, so to the road right-of-way, and to vacate the interior right-of-way so that we can present the site plan that we have before you today and get foundations of buildings onto better soils. Next slide. And this is just a quick one to show at the end of the day, hopefully we will have 5 lots, 2 B3 lots, and 3 R2M lots, again, the largest one in front of you now. Bree, if you could advance the next slide. So we wanted to give you the overall whole site so you understand where these roads, the private road connects to, and how really our landscaping alternative equivalent compliance is why we're asking for them. So what we see, what we're proposing is our larger multifamily buildings, the 2 larger buildings on the western side. These are 3-story buildings. We've intentionally located these buildings towards the transit corridor and the streets to the west to create some separation between those larger buildings and the smaller sort of medium density buildings on the R2M lots. In the middle of those 2 areas, we've proposed to build a sort of a large open space area. We would anticipate that open space area would serve both seniors as well as families and kids. So we wanted that located really in the center of the development off of the main roadways to really create a place where all of our residents will eventually be able to come together. As we went through this process, perhaps 2 of the more challenging issues were working through one with watershed management on how to treat the setback. We talked about condition 5 and the wording for that, but in your packet on page 96 is an agreement that we have with watershed management that really allows us to treat the setback area a little bit differently than you would treat a normal stream and creek setback. And that's really an acknowledgement that while this is Maps Creek and it is part of the archival Fish Creek, it does not currently flow. The source water to Fish Creek is in a pipe in 36th Avenue. And so it flows seasonally, really in spring melt. Because of that, there was acknowledgement from watershed management that we could go in and, with their permission, do certain things as needed over the life of the project. In addition to that, one of the early on conversations that we've had for several years is really how we handle circulation and traffic. Currently, those 2 lots are not connected. The B3 lot, is accessed from the main roadways, and the R2M larger lot is accessed solely from Dorbrandt and 36th Avenue. We felt like for our own internal circulation, it was better But also importantly, in long-range planning, there are some proposals to change the way access is made from Spinard Road and potentially even change the 36th and Spinard into one-way couplets. What that would really do over the long term is create some challenges to access our site, and so we decided to connect those. And in connecting them, we worked with traffic, and there's a sort of concurrent letter on page 99 that there's a road, a private road that connects Door Grant Street over to Chugach along the southern edge of the main part of our development. That really was done to provide that circulation, but importantly to not cut right through the middle of residential areas, to really provide that. While it's a private road, we will anticipate that the general public will use it occasionally, and they also will use it from a pedestrian standpoint. Currently, people use it today, even though that connection does not exist. So, as you see from our site plan, we can go to the site plan that's in front of the commission. On the R2M lot, the two rows of buildings are the row of townhouses to the north that really are designed to have a connection to 36, a visual connection as well as a pedestrian connection, a door that exits onto a patio and is connected to that street. And then the 3 8-plexes, which provide us with our 2-bedroom units on the site, having entrances that face south to the private road, yet to be named private road through the development. So what we wanted is each rows of those buildings, if you will, to orient to those streets, and that really is part of what's guiding our request for a change in landscaping. I think the final thing that I'll point out before going to Bree is we do have really good pedestrian connections in here. On the western end of this site, there's a north-south spine that connects for people that want access to the commercial building or just want access to 36th Avenue. And then after quite some time of conversation with traffic, we decided to provide a pedestrian pathway on the south side within our greenbelt area. This, we think, will be an amenity for our residents, but also will be utilized by the general neighborhood to the south, because that stream setback, if you will, exists through the whole neighborhood, so people really can't get to the north. This is how they would get up to 36th and head sort of east on 36th. But we wanted to do it in a way that is set back to be able to provide a green infrastructure approach. Our site being drained to that green belt. Some of our snow storage will occur there. And I think, overall, it's sort of more fitting than an attached curb that would require a lot more infrastructure. And this is both consistent with, I think, the comp plan, but also with the new design criteria manual that is really recommending that we use a green infrastructure approach whenever possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bree to talk about the 5 landscaping issues that we're bringing before you.
Thanks, Tyler. Like you said, my name is Bree Kiefer. I'm a landscape architect with Huddle, and I'm going to dive into some of the details of the landscape alternatives that we're proposing and that we're seeking approval on tonight. And so Brian went through a lot of great detail on that. So I'm going to touch on each of them and then be available for any questions if there's more specifics you guys are looking for. So I'm going to start with our first landscape alternative request in the form of a variance along the north. So like Brian said, the variance is its own application, and then the AECs that I'll talk about next are part of the major site plan review process. So the variance is located on the north side of the project, and what currently code requires there would be what's called L2 buffer landscaping. And that consists of a 15-foot wide bed with a tree every 10 feet, half of which would be evergreen, and then a row of shrubs. And as Tyler was saying, those townhomes we have along the north, the goal is for those to be street-oriented and have pedestrian connections to 36. So we really felt like the buffer landscaping requirement conflicted with that goal of having street-oriented development, but also created safety concerns having that dense of a planting along with the evergreen requirement would obstruct sightlines, prevent natural surveillance, and then to make it feel less pedestrian cohesive without the sightlines between the entry to the units and the sidewalk along 36. So that variance will be we are proposing L1 landscaping, which is a more narrow bed. It's the same amount of shrubs, but half as many trees, and they can all be deciduous. So that covers the variance along the north. And then I'm going to speak to 3 of the AECs, which, as Ryan noted, those are called alternative equivalent compliant designs, and we're referring to them as AECs. We're proposing 3 treatments on the west property line, and that's because the zoning here being the R2F and the adjacent parcel being B3, the zoning would trigger us to have to do L2 buffer on both parcels, and so that would result in a 30-foot wide bed with double the typical buffer landscaping. So it would be a lot of dense trees and evergreen trees. And so what we're proposing instead is a combination of foundation planting along the north, L1 landscaping adjacent to that and south of that, and then a combination of rain gardens in the south and preserving existing vegetation. And then it's shaded back because this area, B3 parcel, shaded back just because it's not part of the major site plan review, but we did want to point out we are providing a large open space as a part of meeting the intent of buffering the uses. So those 3 AECs are really to serve, to provide some slight buffering between the parcels, but without the density that would be triggered through the typical L2 buffer landscaping. And then the final AEC would allow us to substitute some of the shrub requirements within the parcel with some perennials. And the reason for that request is just to have a consistent planting palette throughout the site. Around the perimeter, we're allowed to substitute some of the shrubs with perennials, and we just wanted that to be consistent within the site as well. And so that touches, again, on the variance request, and then the 4 AECs that we're requesting approval for as a part of our major site plan review. So I'll turn it back to Tyler if there's anything else he wants to touch on, and then I'm going to scroll through some visuals here at that.
Yeah, thanks, Bree. I just wanted to tell the commissioners that we also have Deanna Nasker with Spark, our lead architect and designer, on the phone, and Luke Madsen, who is our civil engineer. So we're at this point, I think, prepared to answer questions. But I think what we're trying to sort of demonstrate is, while this is one approval for a smaller part of the development, it's part of a larger development, and we'd like that development to look and feel like a cohesive, mostly residential, but with a small commercial component with an existing building at the site. So with that, Madam Chair, we'll end our opening presentation.
Thank you very much. That was very well done. You have 6 minutes and 41 seconds. Are there any questions for the petitioner? Okay, I'm not seeing that there are any. Oh. For any commissioner that wishes to speak, if you just go to the agenda page on your screen and select the three dots off to the right and request to speak. Looks like we have Commissioner Winchester. Do you have a question for the petitioner?
Yes, thank you very much. Great presentation, and seems like a really exciting project. I guess the question is, there's a lot of conditions within the parameters, including a recent amendment from the watershed management, and I'm asking the petitioner if they are in agreement with all of the conditions and the amendments to the conditions, and I'm assuming you've seen those.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, the condition number 5, the amendment, really, we had asked Watershed Management if they would consider that, so that came at our request. What it does is it acknowledges that we have this memorandum of understanding pertaining to the setback area. We felt like without acknowledging that with that condition, we were creating a conflict between what was in code and what was in our agreement. So we're in agreement with that. I believe, the only other thing is as long as they remain advisory comments, I think we're fine with it. But for example, we've had conversation with traffic that it isn't actually a homeowners association that needs to be created. It's an agreement that we, Cook Inlet Housing, will maintain the roadway and parking area, mostly clear of snow. But so long as that's advisory, we can work out that language at a later date. And I think our team's otherwise fine with the condition.
Thank you very much. And so those advisories, as far as we're concerned, I think would be left as advisories. They're not going to be put in as conditions. We just want to make sure that all of the conditions that are here, as we start to go through the very detailed process of moving this along, that you're in agreement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cash?
Yes, thank you, Chair Ann. My question is for Ms. Kiefer. I heard you mention that the L1 landscaping is a more narrow bed than the L2. Can you tell me the difference between those? What is the width of each in L1 and L2, please?
Yeah. The L2 buffer landscaping bed is 15 feet wide with a tree every 10 feet and 6 shrubs every 20 feet. And then the L1 is an 8-foot wide bed with a tree every 20 feet and 6 shrubs every 20 feet. So the shrub amount is the same, the width is slightly more narrow, and then the tree count is half the L2 requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Commissioner McKee?
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the necessity for the variance. If I'm looking at kind of the case instances you have listed at the back of your petition packet, and it just, is the crime volume significant enough that this is necessary? Because looking at the instances, it seems like they're mostly generated at a singular location repeatedly, and would those locations be replaced by this development?
Yeah, if I may, I think we have, generally speaking, what we have is a sort of a cohesive development, and we're trying to create, active sight lines throughout. So sort of crime prevention was one of the things that we wanted to sort of make an argument for. I think the other thing is just sort of an inherent contradiction. If we're trying to relate these buildings and pedestrian access of these buildings to 36, it seems to be contradictory to at the same time create a buffer landscape, area along there. So, we made the design decision to not show the backs of these townhouses and orient it internally. We wanted to have an orientation to 36, and it seemed then most consistent then to have still, frankly, the most landscaping you're going to see along 36th Avenue right now, but in a way that is more open and appealing. And I think, the area that is really notorious in this neighborhood is just up the street on the north side of the street, where there is quite a thick amount of landscaping, and there are, pretty regularly people kind of convening in that area. So I think it's a combination of crime, and we honestly want the buildings to relate effectively to the street in that area.
Is there sufficient space to have the wider buffer with the less density of trees and still have your development plan work the way it's intended?
I'll defer to Bree. I mean, again, it's not that we don't have, pervious surface. We would have lawn there. It's just the number of plantings to have to maintain in that width of landscaping. But I'll defer to whether dimensionally it fits.
Yeah, I think that answers it well, in that the shrub count would remain the same because it is the same between the L2 and L1. So changing the width would really change the surfacing. So there would be less lawn and more mulch versus an 8-foot wide mulch area and lawn. So I guess just to reiterate, the landscape width will be the same no matter the width of the bed. It's a combination. There'll be a combination of lawn and then bed width. Does that answer that question?
Yes. Yes. And then is there sufficient in your green infrastructure planting bed? There's sufficient space there for on-site detention if we grant the variance and allow the reduced width in the green buffer from 15 feet to 8 feet?
Luke, you want to? Is the question as we reduce the landscaping down to the 8-foot, then do we then have enough retention for our green infrastructure to function within that, or are you saying if you did not allow it and went to 15 feet, would we have enough for the green infrastructure to function?
Well, initially my question was the first, but you raise a good one with the second.
I might chime in here, and then Luke as well, if he has something to add. But the rain garden, if we were required to do the landscape bed there, it would conflict with the rain garden location and function. Do you have anything to add to that, Luke?
I think I'll just add that we have the rain garden and the green infrastructure designed in the space between the private road and the pedestrian trail, and the intent is to kind of just use that available area as much as possible to create the storage volume and treatment volumes we need. So the actual width of that green infrastructure will be approximately 20 feet wide, and the plantings will be in there, but the volume and the area that we have available on the south side of the street is sufficient to treat the runoff from the site.
Hi, this is the chair. Luke, can you please just for formality state and spell your name for the record?
Oh, yes, sorry. My name's Luke Matson, Lukemattson.
Thank you. Commissioner McKee, my apologies. You may continue if you had other questions.
I'm done with questioning. Thank you.
Commissioner Baxley?
Hi, this is a really good presentation that you guys put together, and I also think this is a really good project for the neighborhood. I have a question about the maintenance of the lawn and the shrubs. And the only reason I ask this is because I recently bought a condo and our lawns burn if we're not out there watering them. And I was just wondering if you guys are going to maintain and water the lawns or maybe provide hose bibs on the buildings for the community to do so.
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is not a condominium project as such. Cook Inlet Housing will be the owner and manager of the units moving forward. And so, you see the large green area that we have that's really not part of this plan, but is to be fully utilized by residents there. We actually have plans to run a hose bib to the central area so that we can maintain it and manage it. We have every intent of maintaining this. I will say it's probably not surprising to you all that when you have the level of landscaping that we're putting here with new development, not only is it an incredible upfront cost, it is one of the largest costs of operating over the life of the project, that along with snow removal. And so we've asked our designers to try to design as resilient as possible with the species that fit with the site. We'll take care of it to the degree that we can. And I guess I would say I'd invite you to any of our existing developments. I think they tend to stand up pretty well when we compare them to other sites around town.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the petitioner? Monica, I know that you are remotely joining us this evening. If you do have any questions, you may type your question or type yes into the message board. Otherwise, go ahead.
No questions. I'm in total favor and support of the project.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions, we are now moving on with opening this hearing to public testimony. Did we receive any public testimony? It looks like no, we did not. Would the petitioner like to use their remaining time to say anything further?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioners, for your questions. I guess I would say, those are all really good questions. We were encouraged by staff to come in and utilize the alternative equivalent compliance process. I was, full disclosure, I was both on staff and on the Planning Commission when it was created in code. And the trepidation that I've always had, is if you design something, you're not sure how it's going to turn out. It's sometimes a lot easier to just go with the code. That said, there was a reason that AEC was developed. It was instituted as a way where you actually didn't have to go explicitly for a variance, but that there was design flexibility that could recognize the conditions on the site, which in this case involves a creek and a creek setback, but also the way in which we'd like to really marry these two areas. There's an invisible zoning line that will be down the middle of this project that we think should be imperceptible to the people that live there. And so what we've come up with, we think, is an alternative equivalent compliance that the first time, honestly, that we've utilized it, but we thought that it was, one that made sense for us to try to move forward and appeal to the Commission to agree with what we're putting forward. I think, number 4 is simply a different species, but the other 3 really look at this line that exists between this B3 parcel and this R2M parcel, and this idea that while we've done vertical mixed use before, this is intended to be a horizontal mixed use development that has an old building and new buildings and some really, I think, good site enhancements that make it a place where you can live in Midtown but still feel like you have a neighborhood park to go to. I think with that, the variance, there was no option with the variance to apply alternative equivalent compliance because, in effect, what we are doing is different from what the buffer landscape if you go down 36, most of what you'll see is the back fence, a 6-foot tall fence, and the back of buildings, or some structures that still have access to 36, that if they were to redevelop would no longer have that driveway access, likely to 36th Avenue. Our approach was to take it differently, and so that as you drive like around this development, you would have buildings that interact with the public realm. We've been trying to do that while also creating kind of a space that works cohesively internal to the site. So that was our design premise. That's why we brought it forward for your consideration, the overall site, as well as the 4 alternative equivalent compliance and the buffer landscaping. And then the green infrastructure approach is really to keep that green belt there. When we have gone to the Spenard Community Council, I've personally gone, a lot over the last 10 years. And one of the things that kept coming up is this notion that someday there might be a fisheries green belt. What our design does is it acknowledges that vision and says, hey, we're not sure that this is going to happen, but this at the very least shows that this green space can be a positive amenity, and at the very least it doesn't preclude it, but we think it helps in some ways really advance that community vision. And with that would require a little bit different treatment than creating a buffer landscaping that kind of goes up into that space. So with that, again, thank you for your questions, and thank you for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. If there are no more questions for staff or the petitioner, the public hearing is now closed. We will need to approve these 2 cases separately, and each AEC request presented in case 2020-0114 will need its own motion and approval prior to voting on the major site plan. So I will begin with case 2020-0113. May we have a motion? Okay, looks like we have a motion from Commissioner Cash and a second from Commissioner McKee. Commissioner Cash, would you please state your motion?
Thank you, Chair Rem. I'd like to move to approve in case 2020-0113 a variance from AMC 21.07-080E.1, Table 21.07-2, minimum site perimeter landscaping by abutting district or street to install L1 visual enhancement landscaping along an abutting arterial, West 36th Avenue, instead of L2 buffer landscaping, subject to conditions 1 and 2, shown on page 7 of the staff report, including the advisory comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Cash. And as I said, it had been seconded by Commissioner McKee. Commissioner Cash, would you please speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. I think this is a wonderful improvement to the area. I agree with this entire horizontal development, and think that the variance is well justified. The approval criteria findings are as follows. Standard A is partially met, although the L1 landscaping does not meet the L2 design standard. It does provide the benefit of promoting crime prevention through environmental design, creating sight lines and visual surveillance to deter unwanted behavior. Standard B is met. The proposed alternative achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to a better degree than the subject standard. It complies with the Anchorage 2040 land use plan, particularly policies 2.3, 3.1, and 7.1. Standard C is met. The variance will result in benefits to the community that are equivalent to or better than compliance with the subject standard by discouraging misconduct and deterring potential criminal activity in and around the area. Standard D is met. It will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property as permitted under this code. Standard F is met. Granting the variance will not restrict or impede ADA access or reasonable accommodation. Standard G is met. The variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of the people of the municipality. In fact, it will enhance safety and welfare. Standard H is met. There is no sign involved.
Thank you, Commissioner Cash. Commissioner McKee, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I also move to support case number 2020-0113. I also believe that this development will be a large asset to this area of town. And again, they've met standards B through H, and standard A is partially met, and that they're meeting the department's recommendations 1 and 2.
Thank you, Commissioner McKee. And Commissioner Cash, just to clarify, I know you went through all of these very beautifully, and just I'm assured that you also agree that item E also the standard was met.
My apologies. Yes, Chair Rim, I skipped right over that. Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else wishing to add any findings of fact or have any comments? Oh. I looked at the chat board here. I see that staff member Yell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was a bit confused on exactly what the motion was, if that included the advisory comments or not. It would be staff's preference that the advisory comments simply remain advisory and not the applicant not be held to those as conditions of approval.
Okay. Commissioner Cash, do you want to just clarify?
Yes, I would like to clarify that those will remain advisory comments and that the petitioner will not be held to them. So they can be pulled. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further comments or discussion, then I think we need to move to a vote. Commissioner Sullivan, if you could vote via the chat. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, I'm trying to, sorry, I lost my chance.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Just 1 second, please.
The motion passes. Continuing to case 2020-0114, we will need an approval for each alternative equivalent compliance request. May we have a motion to approve AEC request 1? Looks like we have a motion from Commissioner Baxley. Commissioner Baxley, would you please state your motion?
Yes, I'm making a motion to approve case 2020-0114, major site plan review for Spenard East Development, multifamily housing within the R2M district. The AEC request number 1, subject to condition number 1 as shown on page 12 of the staff report.
Thank you. And we have a second from Commissioner Winchester. Okay, Commissioner Baxley, would you please speak to your motion?
Yes. Based on the department's findings that are listed on pages 4 and 5, so for the approval criteria, A through C are met. And also the condition, this is based on the condition that's listed on page 12. This approval shall be tied to the corresponding major site plan review request and will expire accordingly under the procedures of AMC 21.03.180E.
Thank you, Commissioner Baxley. Commissioner Winchester, would you please speak to your second?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting the motion. I think, these are some great use of the alternative methods. We haven't really seen much of this, as the petitioner says, and I think it's a great opportunity with these mixed use sites and the use of them to make some pretty unique opportunities available in terms of pedestrians, both interior, exterior to the site, and to see through the sites and to maintain the crime prevention through environmental design criteria, which I'm really excited to see those used, because I don't believe our code particularly addresses that in terms of how some of these border landscapings are used. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Winchester. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this? Seeing none, may we have a vote? And Commissioner, yes, she says yes. The motion passes. Moving on, may we have a motion to approve the AEC request number 2? Just working with our new system here. You just bear with us for one moment. Okay, looks like we do have a motion to approve from Commissioner McKee. Commissioner McKee, would you please state your motion?
I move to support case number 2020-0114, AEC Item 2, installation of L1 visual enhancement landscaping and additional shared open space along the west property line as an alternative to L2 buffer landscaping as required by AMC 21.07.080E. And find that the petitioner has met the following criteria. A, the proposed alternative design achieves the intent of the subject design standard to the same or better degree than the subject standard. They've met criteria B, the proposed alternative design achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to the same or better degree than the subject standard. And criteria C, the proposed alternative design results in benefits to the community that are equivalent to or better than compliance with the subject design standard. I support the motion with the approval of AEC request number 2 with the following condition. This approval shall be tied to the corresponding major site plan review request and will expire accordingly under the procedures of AMC 21.03.180E.
Thank you, Commissioner McKee. Commissioner Baxley, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, I second the motion to approve case 2020-0114, major site plan review for Spinardi's development, multifamily housing within the R2M district, the AEC request number 2, subject to condition 1. I think this project will beautify the area and also provide a more inviting and safe place to live and thrive for the community, and it will also increase walkability for not only residents but surrounding others that want to get through the area.
Thank you, Commissioner Baxley. If there is no other discussion, I will restate this motion since it was stated in 2 ways, but let's just state this motion as the motion on the floor moves to approve case 2020-0114, major site plan review for Spinardi's development, multifamily housing within the R2M district, the AEC request number 2, subject to condition 1. May we have a vote? Commissioner Sullivan is a yes. The motion passes. Moving on to AEC Request 3. May I have a motion to approve? Motion from Commissioner Winchester and a second from Commissioner Cash. Commissioner Winchester, would you please state your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move to approve in case 2020-0114 major site plan review for Spenard East Development multifamily housing within RM District. The AEC request number 3, subject to condition 1.
Thank you. And we do have a second from Commissioner Cash. So Commissioner Winchester, would you care to speak to your motion, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the installation of the green infrastructure rain gardens to naturally control drainage on the southwest property line as an alternative to L2 buffer landscaping as required by AMC 21.07.080E, Table 2107, minimum site perimeter landscaping by abutting district and street. For an R2M district abutting in B3. As stated, I really do agree with the use of the alternative methods that are here. They do meet the proposed alternative design achieves based on green infrastructure as an alternative to the L2 buffer landscaping. And then item B, a proposed alternative design achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, consistent with policy 70 of Anchorage 2020 plan. And the ecological drainage and function of the Anchorage aquatic sources shall be protected and where appropriately restored. This green infrastructure, of course, along Fish Creek is beginning to do some of the same things that the creeks did naturally. And then item C, the proposed alternative design results in benefits to the community. Certainly, treating and retaining the stormwater in this location as an alternative to an L2 buffer landscaping is a great idea. I think that they've done a remarkable job of instituting some really unique methodologies for retaining water on the site and then biofiltration systems for the creek. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner Cash, would you care to speak to your second?
I support for the same reasons that were just cited. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other discussion, we can move to vote for, this is AEC request number 3. Commissioner Sullivan has responded yes. Motion passes. Moving on to AEC number 4. May we have a motion to approve?
Come on. Somebody.
We have a motion from Commissioner Cash and a second from Commissioner McKee. Commissioner Cash, would you please state your motion?
I move to approve in case 2020-0114 major site plan review for Spenard East Development, multifamily housing within the R2M district, the AEC request number 4, subject to condition 1.
Thank you, Commissioner Cash. And Commissioner McKee has seconded. Commissioner Cash, would you please speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. This alternative landscaping design that allows for half the shrubs required, that will be replaced by perennials at a 1-to-3 ratio, 1 shrub for every 3 perennials, I think this request will allow for consistent landscaping aesthetic across this entire Spenard East development. It's compatible with optional design standards allowed under Anchorage Municipal Code 21.07.080E, Table 21.07-1, Landscaping Specifications. Let's see. And it also meets criteria B. The proposed alternative design achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to the same or better degree than the subject standard. It is consistent with Policy 49 of Anchorage 2020, which states the site plan layout and building design for new development shall consider the character of adjacent development, and allowing this landscape will provide a more consistent aesthetic across the petition site. Criteria C, the standard C, the proposed alternative design results in benefits to the community that are equivalent to or better than compliance with the subject design standard. Providing this design flexibility will better serve the overall design and aesthetics of the entire development, making it more attractive place to live and presenting a cohesive aesthetic as an overall benefit to the community as a safe, attractive, and inviting housing opportunity. And then condition 1. So therefore, I do recommend approval of AEC request number 4 with the following condition 1. This approval shall be tied to the corresponding major site plan review request and will expire accordingly under the procedures of AMC 21.03.180E.
Thank you, Commissioner Cash. Commissioner McKee, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you. I also move to support case number 2020-0114, the major site plan review for Spenard East Development multifamily housing within our -2M district, AEC number 4, for all of the reasons that were stated by Commissioner Cash.
Thank you, Commissioner McKee. If there is no further discussion, the vote on the floor is to approve AEC request number 4, subject to condition 1. I believe Commissioner Sullivan is saying yes. That's her 4th yes. And the motion passes. Oh my goodness. I think we are moving on to the motion to approve the major site plan review. May I have a motion? I have a motion from Commissioner Winchester. And a second from Commissioner McKee. Commissioner Winchester, please state your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move to approve case 2020-0114, major site plan review for South Spenard East Development multifamily housing within an R2M district and site plan subject to conditions 1 through 6, and the 3 advisory comments provided by staff will remain advisory comments.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner McKee. Commissioner Winchester, would you please speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I want to reiterate, I really like this project. It's doing a great job of taking a multi-use area of our city and really reworking it into a multi-use, still keeping multi-use function, but with the upgrades that are going on, really appreciate the use of the alternate methods. I want to go ahead and list some findings. The site plan is consistent with previously approved subdivision plat and plan development master plan, another precedent plan, or land use approval. They are requesting a concurrent approval for a subdivision plat, and of course that is one of the conditions of approval will be the approval of that plat. The site plat complies with all the applicable development and design standards set forth in this title, including but not limited to the provisions in the Chapter 21-04 zoning districts, Chapter 2105 use regulations, Chapter 2106 dimensional standards, measurements, and Chapter 2107 development and design standards. The petition site is zoned R2M mixed use, and this project will further intend of underlying zoning district. The submitted site plan complies with the district standards of AMC 2104-020F, which affect this use. And of course, the R2M district is intended primarily for residential, but to allow for single family, and multifamily, and two family with gross densities between 5 and 15 units per acre. And I think they've done a great job of moving along through that. It would be great to see the rest of this project as it comes forward. And the whole project comes into being. This does meet the procedures of AMC 2103-180D.2 and 2107-110F.2.B.III. No other use standards affect this, according to our staff report. Moving on, this also has a the submitted site plan complies with open space requirements. They went further on clear the dimension of storage. I think they're going to handle the snow storage, and it's been mentioned. And there seems to be quite a bit of space for it, just needs to be documented. I think that there's plenty of space along the backside there. We have already approved the alternate methods, AEC 1, AEC 2, AEC 3, and AEC 4, which I think make really good use of those options that are available in the code for perimeter landscaping and for drainage. And it also is in compliance with item 3. The site plan addresses any significant adverse effects that can be reasonably anticipated result from the use by mitigating and offsetting those impacts to the maximum extent feasible. They have developed this site plan, with many iterations, and have taken into account a lot of the opportunities for circulation. They've dealt with the creek. They've dealt with pedestrians. I want to say right here that I really think they've dealt with how pedestrians are going to go integrate both onto the site and moving off of the site, and how pedestrians are going to move around the site. And that's really, and of course, doing the same thing with vehicles. The central park area where they've created both an internal outdoor space and then created the opportunities for people to leave this development and participate in the surrounding community. The development proposed in the site plan is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan, particularly policy of the 2020 plan, policy 9, 12, 49, 54. Also, proposed site plan is consistent with the policies of Anchorage 2040 plan, particularly goal 2, policies 2.3, and goal 7. We are in full, basically, right. Yes, so we're agreeing with the department recommendations, A through E, and items 2 through 6. And the item number 5, with the exception, item number 5 will be modified to read, Resolved with Watershed Management Services any necessary revisions to the site plan to verify no structure or disturbance otherwise not permitted by the existing Memorandum of Understanding dated March 8th, 2019 will occur within the required stream setback as measured from the ordinary high water mark per a, oh, that's not there, sorry. So that is the modification to item 5, and that has been agreed to by the petitioner and by the Department of Watershed Management Services. Okay. I think I got it all.
Thank you, Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner McKee, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you. I also move to support case number 2020-0114, the major site plan review for Spenard East Development multifamily housing within the R-2M district for all of the reasons that were stated by Commissioner Winchester. I think the petitioner has met all of the criteria. I think that this will be an excellent enhancement for this area and moves the community towards the vision that this be a living, working, recreating center. I'm really excited to see that the Cook Inlet Housing Authority is in agreement with criteria 4 and 5, as stream restoration is kind of a passion of mine, and I used to live in this area, and that creek used to run through the back of my yard, and we used to catch fish and frogs there. So there was a creek there at one point in time, and I'm excited to see that you are attending to restoring that or preserving the ability to restore that with your development. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McKee. Is there any further discussion? Yes?
No, I'm good.
You're voting already? Okay. Okay. Just to restate, the motion on the floor moves to approve in case 2020-0114 major site plan review for Spenard East Development multifamily housing within the R2M district, the site plan, subject to conditions 1 through 4 and 6, and amended condition 5. And the advisory comments are still just advisory in the department's recommendations. May we have a vote? And Commissioner Sullivan votes yes. The motion passes. Commissioner Cash, did you have a question?
No, I just had a comment of support, and and so I voted. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I do appreciate the petitioner this evening for an exemplary job developing this area of town in the way that you have. Thank you so much for your presentation this evening. And your patience.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I make one comment?
Sure.
I sat on the Planning Commission for 7 years, and what you all just did with that many approvals is confusing under normal circumstances. So thanks for sticking through that. I will say it's challenging to be on this side, not be in front of you all, and each of us have 3 different screens open and 2 different phones going. So I know you all sort of recognize that. So thanks for bearing with us to make sure that the technology works. I do think in some odd way having the ability to show a presentation, is actually helpful. We haven't always had, the technology in the chambers has not always been good, and I'll be open to you all, but I find it helpful to kind of always look at big picture and then zero things down. So just something in the future. And then Commissioner McKee, we're trying to be open to whatever that stream could be, just like we're trying to be open to whatever that palm tree could end up being placed back in Spenard, and that's why it's sort of sitting there. So my hope is that by next summer we'll be starting things, and we'll have found a place for the palm tree, and we'll be a little bit closer along to Fish Creek moving. So anyway, I just wanted to say that it was a kind of a long process for us to get here. So thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you. Have a great evening, guys.
Thank you.
Moving on the agenda here. And actually, before I move on, I'd like to say that Lori Blake is a phenomenal human being who did help with our motion setup.
And to
Oh, and I was, yes, and Mr. Beyoncio with IT. Thank you so much for keeping this moving this evening. Okay. I think we are at the end of our agenda here. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion from Commissioner Winchester and a second from Commissioner McKee.
All right.
Meeting is adjourned.